It's been almost 2 weeks at the moment of writing this since Stranger Things had its grand finale, and it managed to do something that hasn't happened in a long while: disappoint me. Being a somewhat cynical person myself, I lack the resource necessary for such a specific emotion to flourish. So imagine my surprise when, after 10 years of waiting, all I got was a mouthful of bitter disappointment. The phrasing could have been better there, but YouTube wouldn't allow it. However, this prompted a natural response from anyone marginally capable of critical thinking: introspection. For the uninitiated, this is a process which helps one understand why the feelings one feels feel the way they feel. English really is a silly language. But out of that introspection, this video emerged. So grab a drink and let me take you on a little journey as we decipher why things kept getting stranger. Yet, as with every story, to understand the end, we must first start with a beginning. However, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of having to point out flaws where there are none. Stranger Things Season 1 is so far above the rest of the show that it's almost perfect. And as easy as it is for some hacks to find problems where none exist, this is not my intent. Thus, I am left with but one option: to praise a show which I later have to drag through the mud. Instead, I will attempt to make this a learning experience, pointing out the outstanding moments with the hope that by the end, everyone, including myself, will have learned something. So, without further ado, on the 15th of July 2016, Netflix unleashed a blitzkrieg on the world in the form of a TV show that came out of nowhere, had no connection to any prior franchise, and rose to the top of people's favorite lists in a matter of days. It was a massive and immediate hit, and just like many of you, I was also captured by its almost impeccable first season. In the constant rapids of mediocrity, Stranger Things Season 1 pulled you ashore for a brief respite. But how did it do it? The goal of a first episode is to introduce the audience to the world and its characters, as well as hooking them. The first episode of Stranger Things does this spectacularly. Honestly, it's hard for me to pick which masterful showcase of storytelling technique is best executed. First off, the show wastes no time in setting the atmosphere, dropping the viewer into an eerie hallway with flickering lights and a tense soundtrack. And I do mean that. You suddenly feel yourself in an unsettling situation with not enough information to prepare yourself for whatever's coming. The show does this constantly until the end, and I loved every second of it. Another great strength lies in the character work. It is subtle and a master class of show don't tell. Not only that, but it's integrated into the plot so well that it feels like you've always known these characters somehow. A great example of what I mean can be found in the next scene, incidentally, as the boys play D&D. When the Demogorgon shows up, Will hesitates. Dustin suggests caution, while Lucas loudly calls for action. In a few seconds, we learn the essence of the characters almost secondhand, so it comes as no surprise later when, while looking for Will, Dustin suggests they should not be in the woods where he disappeared without weapons, while Lucas marches ahead with determination. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. After the boys get kicked out by Mike's mom, not being able to finish their fight in D&D, by the way, I'll remind you when this becomes relevant again. It will be some time. Everyone heads home on their bikes. Will, living the furthest away, has to ride alone for the last stretch. He gets startled by a silhouette in the middle of the road and crashes into the woods. He then sensibly abandons his bike and runs home. He locks the door, but neither Joyce, his mom, nor Jonathan, his brother, is there. At no point during this entire scene do we see what's chasing him, which adds to the feeling of unease. The door unlocks itself, which prompts him to escape through the back and into the shed, where the firearms are kept. If, like most humans, you like entertainment, something might be poking you in the eye right about now. If not, I will make it obvious. Will's actions are sensible. You might think I'm setting up a joke here, but I'm not. Think back on the last new shows you've watched. If you could remember anything about them, you might recall a string of shouts coming from you directed at a character and sounding something like, "Don't do that, you f***ing idiot. God, I hope this annoying bitch dies next." Or, "Great, guys. This whole situation could have been avoided if one of you used their heads, but what do I know?" You don't have to confirm or deny, I can't actually hear you. But, more to the point, Will's actions prove to us that the writers are capable of understanding human behavior. I say this because it would be really awkward if, in later seasons, this stopped being the case. However sensible he might be, this does not save Will from the monster. Once his family figures out he's missing, in a scene that also does character work for both Jonathan and Joyce, showing Joyce as a struggling single mom who's somewhat negligent of her boys, and Jonathan as a caring kid who does his best to help his family. Next, we meet Hop, the police chief, who seems to have given up, and at first, he even comes across as a bit of an asshole.
Coffee and contemplation. Flow.
He doesn't believe Joyce, thinking it's just kids doing kid stuff. We cut to the Hawkins lab, where we're shown the gate for the very first time with no context, adding to our questions. We know they're doing some secret government stuff in there, but we don't know what or why. Here we have our first introduction to 11, stealing food from Benny's, the local diner. Benny spots her, prompting her to run, but she is caught, which, yes, a kid can't outrun a grown man, obviously. But Benny turns out to be a good guy, making her a burger and trying to help. We found out she isn't exactly normal, having very little understanding of social cues. As part of a help bid, Benny called social services. And in the meantime, we learn Elle has psionic powers, as she stops a fan with her mind. We jump back to Hop finding Will's bike by the side of the road, and this is the moment he starts taking things seriously. It is in fact such a shift that it practically screams at the audience. The next two notable things are character focused, specifically finding out the Wheeler home is somewhat of a dysfunctional mess and that Hop's lost his daughter. The two things we need to learn here are 1. Set up for Elle staying at the Wheeler home without them noticing, and 2. Explaining Hop's behavior when we first met him, and also his obsession that borders on mania going forward, which is why we had that moment so underlined earlier. We have arrived where we so adventurously rushed to before, the boys going into the woods to find Will. On the way, Mike sees Steve sneaking up into his sister Nancy's room, where they do a bit of flirting, which is about to turn into more, but Nancy shuts it down, choosing to maintain her purity. The first episode ends with two powerful scenes. Firstly, instead of social services, the lab people show up and execute Benny on the spot, with no warning or explanation. Elle makes her escape into the woods, killing the two guarding the back door in the process. By the way, the whole time Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit plays in the background, which is a great song. The series as a whole has an excellent soundtrack, and sadly, this is one of the very few things that remain consistent throughout its full runtime. Secondly, we jump to the Byers home, where Joyce and Jonathan are breaking down while choosing a photo for Will's missing persons poster. This is possibly my favorite scene in this episode, and I think it qualifies as such objectively as well, and I will give you one simple reason for this: sincerity. It is such an intimate scene of a family torn apart that perfectly spells out the emotion it's trying to convey, and it does this all in such a simple way. It doesn't overstay its welcome either, as it gets interrupted by a strange phone call that Joyce believes has something to do with Will's disappearance. But that is also cut short by an electrical surge which fries the phone. We end with the boys finding 11 in the woods as a cliffhanger. You may have noticed that I haven't criticized this episode at all. This is because there isn't anything wrong with it. It is, by all metrics, a perfect first episode. It does what it needs to do and so much more besides. Overall, there's this weird combination of dread and joy permeating throughout it. And I think it is the perfect mix for the story the writers are intending on telling. Think of the elements of a story, character, plot, soundtrack, etc., as colors on a painter's palette. The writer's job is to balance the mix so that not a single color overpowers the canvas, while also ensuring the cohesion of the painting. This is why great stories are so rare and far in between. Excellent writing is very hard to do. And however badly the Duffer Brothers may have screwed up the future seasons, I think we should praise them for this one. Feel free to be as civilized as you can in the comments below, because weirdly enough, I would like to hear your thoughts on the first episode. Until the next one,